work is. Great job. All of the above is the accurate answer. kg into col. You got it. Your choice 832 100 col is right. Equal to calories. Right again. 10J is a valid answer. Calories equal to J. Strong choice. 47.8J is the right answer. Kale into col. Correct response. 450 cal is the most accurate answer. CP represents. Perfect. Specific heat is the correct choice. SI unit for energy. Nice work. You chose joule and it is correct. Heat is measured in. Nice selection. Joules is the correct and valid answer. Calories equal to calories. You chose 5,500 calories, and it is correct. 50 kJ equivalent to. Exactly. 5,000 J makes sense, and it is right choice. Boiler is considered. Correct. Open system is the right answer. Calories equal to dash cal. Nicely done. 1 is a solid answer. This is dash reaction. Well picked. Endothermic is the correct answer. Mother Nature prefers. Sharp thinking, low enthalpy, high entropy is the right choice. The symbol for heat is. Smart move. Q is an accurate answer. The ability to do work. Valid point. Energy is true. Dash is stored energy. Well reasoned. Potential is the correct choice. Joules equal to dash calories. Excellent choice. 11950 is the right answer. What does C stand for? Clear logic. Your choice, specific heat, is sound and 100% true. Represented with a K. Smart pick. Heat is the correct choice. Pepsi can is considered. You're right. Closed system is the correct answer. 1 calorie equal to dash joules. Right choice. 4.1A4 is the best answer. An endothermic reaction. Good job. Your answer absorbs heat works well here. Cup of tea is considered. On track. Open system is the correct answer. Joule is SI unit of dash. Bravo! Heat is the answer. Form of energy, lightning. Great thinking. Electrical energy is the right choice. The SI unit for entropy. Excellent. Joule Kelvin is a brilliant choice. Delta T is calculated by. Solid response. TFT is a valid choice. The unit for heat are. Good thinking. Calories or joules is the right answer. Convert 42 kJ into joules. Well done. 42,000 J is the right choice. The SI unit of energy is. Great thinking. Joule is the right choice. Convert 120 cal to joules. Valid point. 580 joules is true. A unit of heat is the dash. Exactly. Joule makes sense and it is right choice. Calories equal to calories? Solid response. 4 calories is a valid choice. What is the SI unit for Q? Well reasoned. Joules is the correct choice. An exothermic process has... Nice work. You chose Q and it is correct. Standard condition referred to. Smart move. All of the answer is an accurate answer. What process is exothermic? You're right. Condensation is the correct answer. Q stands for which variable? Bravo, heat is the answer. Enthalpy is represented by... Correct response. H is the most accurate answer. Joules to calories. Well done. 1.5 Col is the right choice. In which way does heat flow? Excellent choice. Warmer to cooler is the right answer. The system is represented by... Correct. The chemical reaction is the right answer. Convert 350J equal to dash calories. Smart pick 8365 is the correct choice. Energy associated with motion. Right again. Kinetic energy is a valid answer. Energy is measured in units of... Right choice. Joules is the best answer. The variable C stands for what? Perfect. Specific heat is the correct choice. Specific heat of water is dash. Great job. A 4.134 G is the accurate answer. What does temperature measure? Nicely done. Average kinetic energy is a solid answer. Which reaction is endothermic? Well picked. Decomposition is the correct answer. Dash is the ability to do work. Nice selection. Energy is the correct and valid answer. Form of energy. A runner running. On track. Mechanical energy is the correct answer. Which one is not a form energy? Clear logic. Your choice plant is sound and 100% true. Form of energy, symbols crashing. Good thinking. Sound energy is the right answer. A reaction that releases heat is? Sharp thinking. Exothermic is the right choice. What are the two units for heat? Excellent. Cal and joules is a brilliant choice. Conversion factor 1 cal equal to dash to J. Good job. Your answer 4.184 works well here. Heat is dash when bond is formed. You got it? Your choice released is right. What is the concept of hot pack? You chose endothermic reaction, and it is correct. Which is not a bond in chemistry? Strong choice. James Bond is the right answer. The formula for specific heat is... Solid response. Q equal tomtat is a valid choice. How many calories are in 6740 key? Smart move. 1609 Col is an accurate answer. What is the mass of 5 ml of water? Bravo. 5 grams is the answer. Energy in endothermic reactions are... Right again. Absorbed is a valid answer. Heat always flows from dash to dash. Nicely done. Hot to cold is a solid answer. Solid ice turning into liquid water. Right choice. Entropy is increasing is the best answer. The heat of reaction is also called.
Good job. Your answer enthalpy works well here.
What is the standard unit for heat?
Well picked. Joule is the correct answer. Batteries are which type of energy? Excellent choice. Chemical is the right answer. The energy of motion is dash energy. Great thinking. Kinetic is the right choice.
Heat flows from dash to dash objects.
Strong choice. Warmer to cooler is the right answer. What is the SI unit for temperature? Correct response. Kelvin is the most accurate answer. Breaking bonds is a V and dash process. Nice work. You chose endothermic and it is correct. What is the freezing point of water? Smart pick. 0 degrees Celsius is the correct choice. What are the products of combustion?
Nice selection. Carbon dioxide plus water is the correct and valid answer.
A process that releases heat is a... You got it. Your choice exothermic process is right. Form of energy, uranium atom's nucleus. Valid point. Nuclear energy is true. In an endothermic reaction, energy is correct. Absorbed is the right answer. The measure of randomness in a system? Well reasoned. Entropy is the correct choice. What is the unit of measuring energy? On track. Joules. J is the correct answer. How does energy change in a reaction? You're right. It transfers is the correct answer. How can you convert Kelvin to Celsius? Perfect. Subtract 273 is the correct choice. Another name for heat energy is dash. You chose thermal energy, and it is correct. What are the two main types of energy? Sharp thinking. Potential and kinetic is the right choice. During a phase change, temperature dash. Well done. Stays the same is the right choice. Exothermic means a reaction does what? Excellent. Releases energy is a brilliant choice. Predicts the spontaneity of a reaction. Great job. Gibbs free entropy is the accurate answer. The energy transferred between objects. Good thinking. Heat is the right answer. Car fuel tank is considered dash system. Clear logic. Your choice open is sound and 100% true. Which arrows indicates enthalpy change? Exactly. Arrow D makes sense and it is right choice. Dribbling a basketball is an example of.
Excellent. Kinetic energy is a brilliant choice.
What is the SI unit of heat and energy? Correct. Joule is the right answer. Exothermic reactions are reactions that. Nicely done. Release heat is a solid answer. As temperature increases, molecules dash. Strong choice. Move faster is the right answer. A measure of the disorder of the system. Correct response. Entropy is the most accurate answer. Solid changing into a gas is called dash. You're right. Sublimation is the correct answer.
One food calorie equal to dash chemistry calories.
Bravo, 1000 is the answer.
The capacity to do work or transfer heat.
You got it. Your choice energy is right. Which of these processes is endothermic?
Well done. Sublimation is the right choice. The energy of particles in motion is dash.
Smart move. Thermal energy is an accurate answer.
Name the phase change. Liquid turns to gas.
Smart pick. Evaporating, boiling is the correct choice.
What is being transferred as you do work?
Clear logic. Your choice energy is sound and 100% true.
Name the phase change. Gas turns to liquid. Good job. Your answer condensing works well here. Form of energy. Heat lamp warming a lizard. Right again.
Thermal energy is a valid answer.
What has particularly high specific heat?
Valid point. Water is true.
The sum of the change in heat and work is.
Exactly. Internal energy makes sense, and it is right choice.
Energy of motion is which type of energy?
Nice work. You chose kinetic and it is correct. When you melt a solid, it turns into a dash. Nice selection. Liquid is the correct and valid answer.
The SI unit of heat and energy is the dash.
Well picked. Joule is the correct answer.
Which phase change represents sublimation?
Sharp thinking. Solid to gas is the right choice.
The Q in thermodynamic equations is dash.
Perfect. Energy lost or gained is the correct choice.
All of the reaction refer to definition of.
Good thinking. Standard enthalpy of combustion is the right answer.
What happens when heat energy is absorbed?
On track. Bond breakage occurs is the correct answer.
What causes particles to move around more?
Well reasoned. Heat is the correct choice.
What is the specific heat of liquid water?
Great thinking. 4.4 judges C is the right choice.
Which of these is an endothermic reaction?
Great job. Thermal decomposition is the accurate answer.
What is randomness or disorder of a system?
You chose entropy, and it is correct.
Enthalpy and dash are used interchangeably.
Right choice. Heat is the best answer.
Which of the following is a reducing agent?
Excellent choice. Magnesium is the right answer.
Are there molecules moving in a solid brick?
Solid response. Yes is a valid choice.
Sublimation is the change of a what to what?
Strong choice. Solid to gas is the right answer.
Heating will continue until what is reached?
You got it. Your choice equilibrium is right.
Which of these is the unit for specific heat?
Bravo, JGOC is the answer.
What phase change has an increase in entropy?
Good thinking. Liquid to gas is the right answer. Thermal energy always moves from dash to dash. Sharp thinking. Hot to cold is the right choice. If we want to calculate lattice energy, we use. Well done. Born-Haber cycle is the right choice. Heat always travels from dash to dash objects. Smart pick. Hot to cold is the correct choice.
Energy stored because of gravity is a type of.
Nice selection. Potential energy is the correct and valid answer.
The term thermodynamics refers to the study of.
Right choice. Energy changes is the best answer.
The energy stored in an object is dash energy.
Correct. Potential is the right answer.
The part of the universe that is being studied.
Right again. System is a valid answer.
What are chemical reactions that absorb energy?
Well reasoned. Endothermic is the correct choice.
Which of the following are specific heat units?
Nice work. You chose joules, Ta, Cg, and it is correct. What do we mean by the term standard conditions?
You chose 100 to the 9AK and the modium 3, and it is correct.
Dash is the capacity to do work or supply heat.
Good job. Your answer energy works well here. A device used to calculate enthalpy known as dash.
Well picked. Calorimeter is the correct answer.
In this type of system, heat or energy flows out.
Smart move. Exothermic is an accurate answer.
Energy that is stored in bonds between atoms is.
Clear logic. Your choice chemical energy is sound and 100% true. A dash is a device for measuring temperature. Great thinking. Thermometer is the right choice.
The heat of the transformation from solid to gas.
You're right. Heat of sublimation is the correct answer. Combustion reaction has two reactants. They are on track. Fuel and oxygen is the correct answer.
The dash include everything else in the universe.
Exactly.
Surrounding makes sense, and it is right choice.
The heat of the transformation from gas to liquid. Nicely done. Heat of condensation is a solid answer. A chemical equation that includes enthalpy change.
Solid response. Thermochemical is a valid choice.
Disorder or entropy in the universe is increasing. Valid point. Second law of thermodynamics is true. Heat always flows from a dash to a cooler object. Perfect. Warmer is the correct choice. Temperature is the dash energy of moving particles. Excellent. Average kinetic is a brilliant choice.
How would you calculate the change in temperature?
Correct response. Final temperature, initial temperature is the most accurate answer. What phase holds its shape and has a fixed volume? Great job. Solid is the accurate answer. The peak of a potential energy diagram is the dash. Excellent choice. Activation energy is the right answer. A process that absorbs heat is a dash reaction. Sharp thinking. Endothermic is the right choice. What takes place when a solid changes to a liquid? Solid response. Melting is a valid choice.
Which of the following would be the best insulator? Nicely done. Air is a solid answer. Hot things have dash thermal energy than cold things. On track. More is the correct answer.
Which phase change represents a decrease in entropy?
You got it. Your choice gas to liquid is right.
Mass must always be in dash for energy calculations. Great thinking. Grams is the right choice. A dash is a device used to measure the flow of heat. Clear logic. Your choice calorimeter is sound and 100% true.
The first law of thermodynamics states that energy is right again. Conserved is a valid answer. Name a substance that has a high specific heat value.
Nice work. You chose water and it is correct.
It is any part of the universe that we wish to study.
Bravo, system is the answer. A reaction that releases heat from the system is dash.
Correct response. Exothermic is the most accurate answer.
How many calories are in 125 joules?
Good job. Your answer 29.9 works well here. Which one of the following is an endothermic process?
Correct. Photosynthesis is the right answer. A kind of energy stored in an object for later uses.
Nice selection. Potential energy is the correct and valid answer.
The heat released or gained during a chemical reaction. Well picked. Heat of reaction is the correct answer.
It is defined as the energy contained within a system.
You're right. Internal energy is the correct answer. Enthalpy changes for endothermic reactions are always. You chose positive, and it is correct. The minimum energy particles must have to react is the smart move. Activation energy is an accurate answer. What device measures the change of energy for a system?
Exactly. Calorimeter makes sense, and it is right choice. Which of the following involves an exothermic reaction?
Excellent. Burning of paper is a brilliant choice. What is the freezing temperature of water in Fahrenheit?
Right choice. 32 is the best answer.
When you hold an ice in your palm, the ice melts because... Well reasoned. Ice absorbs heat is the correct choice. Which substance has the strongest intermolecular forces? Excellent choice. Nickel is the right answer. A release of energy occurs during which change of phase? Great job. Gas to liquid is the accurate answer. Which of the following is example of exothermic reaction?
Well done. Condensation is the right choice.
Dash is the transfer of heat by the movement of a fluid. Strong choice. Convection is the right answer. Compounds can use energy to break which of the following? Valid point. Both is true. The movement of thermal energy from one thing to another. Smart pick. Heat transfer is the correct choice. During a phase change, the temperature of a substance dash. Good thinking. Always stays the same is the right answer. If two objects reach the same temperature, they are at dash. Perfect. Thermal equilibrium is the correct choice.
The heat gained or lost by a salt as it dissolves in water.
Valid point. Heat of solution is true. When energy is absorbed, the reaction is described as dash. Strong choice. Endothermic is the right answer.
The part of the universe on which you focus your attention. Solid response. System is a valid choice.
What is the heat content of a system at constant pressure? Perfect. Enthalpy is the correct choice.
In energy calculations, temperature must be in which unit?
Excellent choice. Celsius is the right answer.
For an endothermic reaction, the heat is on the dash side.
Smart pick. Reactant is the correct choice. Heat of vaporization can be applied to what phase changes? Exactly. Condensation and vaporization makes sense, and it is right choice. Heat will always flow from a dash object to a dash object. Nicely done. Warm to cold is a solid answer. Which process does not involve the release of heat energy? Smart move. Melting of butter is an accurate answer. The state of disorder of a system is described by the term.
On track. Entropy is the correct answer.
A process where the system absorbs heat is a dash process. Good job. Your answer endothermic works well here. On a heat curve, what is changing along the diagonal lines? Sharp thinking. Temperature is the right choice. The container used in endothermic reaction will become dash. You're right. Cold is the correct answer. Energy is neither created or destroyed, it only changes form.
Well done. First law of thermodynamics is the right choice.
The heat absorbed or released during a chemical reaction is. Right choice. Enthalpy is the best answer. How many calories are required to boil 75 grams of water? You chose 169,500, and it is correct. What is a tool that measures the heat of chemical reactions? You got it. Your choice calorimeter is right. Heat released in endothermic reaction is dash heat absorbed. Nice selection. Less than is the correct and valid answer. Which of these is not an example of an intramolecular force? Great thinking. Hydrogen bonding is the right choice. The type of reaction that absorbs heat from the surroundings. Great job. Endothermic is the accurate answer. What is the meaning of thermo in the word thermochemistry? Nice work. You chose heat and it is correct. Which type of energy is the energy stored in chemical bonds? Bravo. Chemical potential energy is the answer. Which of these phase changes requires energy to be released? Excellent. Condensation is a brilliant choice. The energy of the system dash during an endothermic reaction. Well picked. Increases is the correct answer. Which of the following is not an example of potential energy? Correct response. Molecular movement is the most accurate answer. Heat travels from the sun to the earth by the process of dash. Well reasoned.
Radiation is the correct choice.
The amount of heat necessary to raise 1 gram of a substance wonk. Good thinking. Specific heat is the right answer. Stored energy is another way of describing what energy type. Correct. Potential is the right answer. The temperature of reactants will dash in exothermic reaction. Right again. Increase is a valid answer. Energy due to position or composition is dash energy. Clear logic. Your choice. Potential is sound and 100% true. What is the kinetic energy of a ball sitting on top of a hill? On track. Zoj is the correct answer. It is defined as the degree of coldness or hotness of an object. You got it? Your choice temperature is right. Choose a substance with enthalpy of formation not equal to 0. Bravo. Carbon dioxide is the answer. What piece of apparatus is used to measure temperature changes? Correct. Thermometer is the right answer. Which of the following lists provide 3 exothermic processes? You're right. Condensing, deposition, and freezing is the correct answer. An organic compound that is made up of only carbon and hydrogen. Excellent choice. Hydrocarbon is the right answer. If a chemical reaction is exothermic, the temperature would dash. Excellent. Increase is a brilliant choice. True or false? Melting and freezing occur at the same temperature. Good job. Your answer true works well here. How much liquid water can you change 20 C if you apply 20,000 G? Valid point. 250 G is true. Chemical reactions where both Q and H are negative are considered. Correct response. Exothermic is the most accurate answer. This quantity measures the average kinetic energy of a substance. Right again. Temperature is a valid answer. What phase takes on the container's shape but has a fixed volume? Strong choice. Liquid is the right answer. What do you call the energy that is required to start a reaction? Well done. Activation energy is the right choice. What is the chemical structure identified at the top of the curve? You chose activated complex, and it is correct. A calorimeter is a device whose primary purpose is to measure dash. Right choice. Heat transfer is the best answer, which is not a factor that affects the rate of chemical reactions. Well reasoned. Mass of reactants is the correct choice. Endothermic reaction is when the heat is dash from the surrounding. Great thinking. Taken in is the right choice. When you touch hot sand, heat is transferred by dash to your skin. Solid response. Conduction is a valid choice. Dash is the measurement of the average kinetic energy of an object. Good thinking. Temperature is the right answer. Dash is a type of energy that flows from hotter to cooler regions. Nice work. You chose heat, and it is correct. The absorption of heat during a chemical reaction is known as dash. Nicely done. Endothermic is a solid answer. Dissolving ammonium salt in water will cause a dash in temperature.
Smart pick. Drop is the correct choice.
Hot coffee is stirred with a spoon. The spoon gets hot due to dash.
Smart move. Conduction is an accurate answer.
The reaction is dash, and therefore heat is dash by the reaction.
Great job. Exothermic released is the accurate answer.
Anything around the system, but not the system itself, is called the...
Exactly. Surroundings make sense, and it is right choice.
Dash is the average kinetic energy of the particles of a substance.
Nice selection. Temperature is the correct and valid answer.
Releasing heat into the surroundings occurs during a dash reaction.
Perfect. Exothermic is the correct choice.
Substances can be made to change phase by adding or taking away dash.
Well picked. Energy is the correct answer.
Dash reaction is a reaction that absorbs heat from the surroundings.
Sharp thinking. Endothermic is the right choice.
Which of the following chemical reaction is not exothermic reaction?
Clear logic. Your choice, photosynthesis, is sound and 100% true.
Aside from carbon dioxide, what other product of combustion reaction?
Correct response. Water is the most accurate answer.
The heat required to melt 1 gram of a substance at its melting point.
Right again. Heat of fusion is a valid answer.
During an endothermic reaction, heat is dash and chemical bonds dash.
Right choice. Absorbed broken is the best answer.
What type of heat transfer is a beaker on a hot plant an example of?
Well done. Conduction is the right choice.
Which of the following ionic compound has the largest lattice energy?
Solid response. Nickel is a valid choice.
Which of the following is a factor in the heat capacity of an object?
You got it. Your choice mass is right.
1 col per 1000 cal 1 col equal to 1000 col equal to 114J. Convert 2.27J to col.
Smart move 0.566 Carl is an accurate answer.
How many joules are equivalent to 0.333 kilocalories?
Exactly. 1390J makes sense and it is right choice.
A helium nucleus with 2 protons and 2 neutrons is called a dash.
Good job. Your answer alpha particle works well here.
Calculate the amount of energy required to freeze 98.0 grams of water.
You chose Akash, and it is correct.
In a dash process, the system loses heat as the surroundings heat up.
Correct. Exothermic is the right answer.
Thermochemistry is the study about dash changes in chemical reactions.
Excellent. Heat is a brilliant choice.
Which of the following is transferred due to a temperature difference? Great job. Thermal energy is the accurate answer. High temperatures and low pressures will usually result in which phase? Excellent choice. Gas is the right answer. Temperature is a measure of average energy of individual atoms.
Well reasoned. Kinetic is the correct choice.
A system that allows the transfer of heat, but not the transfer of mass.
Sharp thinking. Closed system is the right choice.
Which of the following represents when a gas turns directly to a solid?
Clear logic.
Your choice deposition is sound and 100% true. The energy stored in the chemical bonds of a substance is known as dash. Well picked. Chemical potential energy is the correct answer. How is a Celsius temperature converted to a Kelvin temperature reading? Great thinking. By adding 273/16 is the right choice. Dash, convection, and conduction are the three types of heat transfer. Nice work. You chose radiation and it is correct. The process which does not need the application of energy to take place. Bravo. Spontaneous is the answer. Which law of thermodynamics states that absolute zero cannot be reached? Strong choice. An offer is the right answer. In a dash process, the system gains heat as the surroundings cool down. Smart pick. Endothermic is the correct choice. If a reaction is endothermic, temperature of the surroundings would dash. Perfect. Decrease is the correct choice. If heat is released by a chemical system, an amount of heat will be dash. Valid point. Absorbed by the surroundings is true. What tool can you use to measure the average kinetic energy of a sample? You're right. A thermometer is the correct answer. During a dash reaction, heat flows from the system to the surroundings. Good thinking. Exothermic is the right answer. During a dash reaction, heat flows from the surroundings to the system. Nice selection. Endothermic is the correct and valid answer. Which one of the following is not a change in state of matter? Nicely done. Fission is a solid answer. Most of the physical and chemical change are accompanying with a change in. On track. Energy is the correct answer. What is the minimum amount of energy needed to start a reaction is called? Excellent choice. Activation energy is the right answer. The heat content of a system at constant pressure is the same as a property. Nice selection. Enthalpy is the correct and valid answer. What device is used to measure heat flow in physical or chemical processes? You got it. Your choice calorimeter is right. Which of the following is an example of an endothermic process or reaction? Right again. Melting is a valid answer. Which component of a bomb calorimeter is filled with oxygen under pressure? Correct. The bomb is the right answer. Amount of energy required to increase the temperature of 1 g of water by 1 C. You're right. Calorie is the correct answer. How much energy is required to raise 85.36 g of water from 18.5 C to 60.3 off? Nice work. You chose 4900 J, and it is correct. The heat per unit mass required to vaporize a substance at its boiling point. On track. Heat of vaporization is the correct answer. Which phase of matter has the greatest motion and least orderly arrangement? Well reasoned. Gas is the correct choice. The heat lost when 1 mole of a liquid solidifies at a constant temperature. Solid response. Molar heat of solidification is a valid choice. How many calories would be in a candy bar that has 200 nutritional calories? Well picked. 200,000 cal is the correct answer.
A Big Mac has 563 food calories. How many joules of energy are in a Big Mac? Clear logic. Your choice 230 60,000 joules is sound and 100% true. According to the law of conservation of energy, the energy in the universe is... Great thinking. Constant is the right choice.
The type of reaction in which he is released to the surroundings is called...
Strong choice. Exothermic is the right answer.
During an endothermic reaction, the temperature of the surroundings will dash.
Perfect. Decrease is the correct choice.
How many plateaus can be found on a complete heating curve for any substance?
Well done. 2 is the right choice.
Exothermic reaction is a chemical reaction that dash heat to the surroundings.
Nicely done. Release is a solid answer.
What instrument would you use to detect an endothermic or exothermic reaction?
Valid point. Thermometer is true. Enthalpy is the energy absorbed or released during a chemical reaction as dash. You chose heat, and it is correct.
The release of chemical potential energy produces all of the following except... Right choice. Cooling is the best answer. The second law of thermodynamics states that entropy of a system tends to dash. Good job. Your answer increase works well here. Calculating the heat of a reaction or the total heat of a system is known as...
Exactly. Enthalpy makes sense and it is right choice.
A measure of the average kinetic energy of the particles in an object is called... Good thinking. Temperature is the right answer. If the system releases 150 J of heat, how much heat does the surrounding absorb? Sharp thinking. 150 J is the right choice. Plants absorb light energy and convert it to dash energy during photosynthesis. Great job. Chemical is the accurate answer. The minimum amount of energy required to start a chemical reaction is called the... Smart move. Activation energy is an accurate answer. Amount of heat absorbed or released by a system in a chemical reaction is called... Correct response. Enthalpy change of reaction is the most accurate answer. Which set of definition of oxidation in terms of oxygen and electron is correct? Smart pick. Gain oxygen, lost electrons is the correct choice. Which simple covalent molecule has the highest standard enthalpy of atomization? Excellent. Na is a brilliant choice. Which of the following daily application applies the concept of thermochemistry? Bravo, thermos is the answer. How you will get all these quiz questions in PDF books format? You chose contact Narayan Changder, and it is correct.